Well, joining me now is Stephen Timms, Labour's Shadow Employment Minister, and the Conservative MP Nadhim Zahawi. Stephen Timms first. This benefits cap is really pretty meaningless, isn't it? Because it only applies to structural benefits, so i.e. those not affected by the economic cycle. So if the economy deteriorates, the welfare bill would still go up, wouldn't it?
No, it's an important tool for managing the cost of social security, and we recognise we're going to need to do that very effectively with a laser focus, as Ed Miliband said today.
Would the welfare bill go up, though, if the economy deteriorated?
Well, that depends. I mean, what Ed has said today, we're going to tackle worklessness so that people have the opportunity to get into work and are indeed required to get into work once that opportunity is provided. Tackle the problem of low pay so that the state isn't always picking up the tab. Reorganising housing spending so we're investing in building new houses and not simply paying out rent. And together that will enable us to manage the overall level of social security spending.
But if it only applies to structural benefits, then if the economy deteriorated, the welfare bill would go up.
Well, indeed, Ed was very clear that we would want the automatic stabilisers to continue to operate, but this is a very important tool for planning the expenditure from the exchequer in order to manage the overall accounts.
Nadhim Zahawi, you spent the day shooting this down, so presumably this new pragmatic approach by Labour is something you're a bit worried about, isn't it?
Well, it's pie-in-the-sky economics. You've quite rightly pointed out about the structural element of benefits. Labour have voted against £83 billion in the last 3 years of welfare reforms. We've tried to do housing benefit cap, they voted against it. On the overall cap in benefits, 26,000, which is what an average family would earn, they voted against it. Universal credits, they're against it because the problem they've got is, in reality, if they're going to tell the truth, they're going to have to borrow much more, same old Labour, borrowing more and spending more, if Ed Miliband wants to do what he wants to do.
Well, let me put those points direct to Stephen Timms here, because you have to admit that on welfare you got it wrong. This is an admission today that you got it wrong, isn't it? Because in December, Ed Miliband pledged to wage war on George Osborne on benefit cuts. Well, now he's pretty much in agreement.
Well, there are things that we strongly disagree with the government on. There are some things that we think they've got right.
But you didn't say that in December. You admit that you got it partially wrong.
We support the principle. We've always supported the principle of universal credit. Unfortunately,
waging war on George Osborne on benefit cuts, was that supporting the principle?
No, the universal credit, we've always supported the principle of universal credit. There's a simplification of the system, and we backed it. Unfortunately, it's running far too late.
You didn't vote for it, though, did you?
It was one of a large number of measures in a bill, and we were absolutely clear, consistently, we've supported the principle of universal credit. The problem is this government's policy is not working. Unemployment is continuing to rise. Youth unemployment is still almost 1 million. We've got to tackle that problem if we're going to bring spending on social security
Well, Stephen
down.
Timms has got a point there, because talking about housing, for example, your own budget forecasts show that despite all the changes you've made to housing benefits, that bill is still forecast to rise.
I think you're right. There's more to do. If you look at what we're trying to do in terms of right to buy and then spending that money that comes in from right to buy on building more housing. If you look at what we're doing for hold on a second, Stephen. If you look at what we're doing with housing associations, providing billions of pounds to help them build more housing.
But the changes to the housing benefits are not working because the bill is still going up. Well, you accept that?
The bill may be going up, but we're at least trying to address it, and we're trying to address it in the right way. We're trying to focus. At the end of the day, the big philosophical argument is, are we going to focus benefits on those in most need, and are we going to make sure that it always pays to work? Ian Duncan Smith's reforms mean that if you have a choice, like the young man in your piece, between staying at home or working, then you will choose work because your benefits won't fall off the edge of a cliff. Labour voted against it. They have to come clean and explain why it is they vote against these things, which is why the accusation sticks that this is same old Labour.
Okay.
Borrow more and spend.
Okay, but you accept that housing benefit, the changes you've made are not working in their entirety because the bill's still going up. So do you also accept that for rents to come down, you need to build more houses, which you're reluctant to do in the quantities that are needed?
Well, no. We actually have a very strong policy on affordable rent, which means it costs about £20,000 per unit under Labour because they opposed the affordable rent programme. Our calculations today, they have to tell us what they are, it would cost them £60,000 per unit. So, there is a huge discrepancy here. Now, either Ed Miliband says, I'm going to borrow more and I'll spend more, or this just won't work. The same applies, by the way, this idea that he can create all these jobs. Workless households doubled under Labour from 1997 to 2010. You don't create sustainable jobs by government spending on them. You create them by creating the environment for the private sector to create them.
Just before we go, a story that we just covered a minute ago. If it's wrong for Google to avoid paying taxes, why is it right for you to allow your biggest donor to avoid £1.5 million by allowing him to donate in shares?
Well, Ed Miliband answered that question this morning. We will pay tax on the dividends that we receive.
But will you pay the £1.5 million back to the Treasury?
We'll pay tax on the dividends
But you won't pay the £1.5 million
in the proper way. Can I answer the point about house building? House building at the moment is the lowest it's been since the 1920s. The government's approach is failing, clearly failing.
Sorry, just on this point on tax, you advised one of your biggest donor, in fact, how to avoid tax. That's deeply hypocritical, isn't it, when you are banging on about Google avoiding tax?
No, what I'm saying is the tax will be paid when we receive the annual dividend income stream. That's how the donation has been made. We'll get an income from it, and we'll pay tax on that income.
There's absolutely nothing wrong in allowing him to avoid £1.5 million in tax.
The tax will be paid when we receive the dividend income.
Stephen Timms, Nadhim Zahawi, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Krish.